Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Deep Impact, Are You in a Collision Course with CMMC, presented by Rea Associates, a top 100 regional CPA and business consulting firm with offices across Ohio and the Southeast Ohio Manufacturing Extension Partnership located at the Ohio State University South Centers. The Southeast Ohio MEP is one of the 6 MEPs across the state of Ohio that strive to help small and medium-sized manufacturers to increase sales, create jobs, and generate cost savings throughout technological innovation, workforce training, and improved management practices. My name is Imani Fields, and I'll be walking you through a few housekeeping items and introducing our speakers for today's webinar. First, if you have any questions during today's presentation, you may enter them into the chat box on your screen. We will try to answer as many questions as we can at the conclusion of today's presentation. However, to be respectful of your time, we know that we will not be able to get to them all. Therefore, following today's webinar, we will review all questions and send out the answers via email as soon as we can. If you would like a copy of today's slides, you'll find that they're available in the handout section of the webinar dashboard on your computer screen. Today's webinar will be presented by Andrew Geiser and Ty Whittenburg. As a senior manager at Rea Associates, Andrew Geiser has over 8 years of experience that crosses both public and industry accounting and finance. He is committed to solving complex issues for clients across multiple disciplines, but focuses his time in the areas of consulting, tax planning, tax preparation, and primarily in the manufacturing industry. During his time at Rea, Andrew has led numerous engagements to help clients better understand their cost structure and overall profitability, while also serving clients in the areas of business and individual taxation. As a senior information assurance manager and a CMMC registered practitioner on Rea Associates Cybersecurity Services team, Ty can be found ensuring organization technology and networks driving business objectives by identifying potential loss events, reducing their frequency and loss magnitude. With more than 10 years of industry experience, he is involved with the Central Ohio Information Systems Security Association, the Greater Ohio Fair Chapter, Ohio River Valley Security Alliance, and more. Prior to joining Rea, Ty worked at Cyber6 Group, Dark Rhino Security, and Apple. And I will pass it on to you guys.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Imani, and thanks everyone for taking time out of your day to join us today as we talk a little bit about CMMC and dive into that, and which Ty is going to cover the bulk of that. But before we get started, just wanted to kind of give an update or talk through some of the things that we're seeing on the manufacturing front right now in our manufacturing and distribution segment here at Rea. What we're hearing from a lot of our clients as far as what their biggest issue is and how that kind of all relates back to cybersecurity and CMMC. So, to get started, one of the questions that we like to ask our clients is, just kind of as a conversation starter, a lot of times is, what is your biggest issue right now? And really over the past several years, that has always seemed to float to the labor area, and just the difficulty in not only finding the workforce needed to run facilities and run manufacturing processes, but also to retain the workers that you have. And so while, through COVID, this whole COVID pandemic over the past year, a little over a year now, that has seemed to be exacerbated, especially with some of the unemployment benefits as well. We were seeing this long before COVID in a lot of our client base, just with the way the economy was and the strength of the economy before COVID. And so that's really one of the biggest issues we're seeing right now. And what I don't want to do is jump over some of the supply chain issues that we're seeing as well, kind of as a result of COVID. So a lot of our clients are struggling with those, and I don't want to downplay those or anything, but really for the purposes of this and for what I would say overall, what we're seeing, it tends to gravitate towards the labor side. As far as, actually, if you want to go back, Abby, as far as what comes with that and what we're seeing as a result of this, a lot of it is just higher costs, as I'm sure anybody on the call that is involved in manufacturing and in a manufacturing company can attest to. Wages are going up, and a lot of times it's starting with what's having to be paid to get somebody in the door, and then how do you compare that with what you're paying maybe existing employees, and is that really fair? And so we're seeing higher costs on the wage side. but then also on the benefits side too. It's not just, paying people more. It's a more robust, retirement plan or 401k plan. It's a more robust healthcare plan, maybe a more robust PTO or pay time off plan from that standpoint. So overall, we're seeing increase in labor costs. The second issue and effect that we're seeing as a result of this, and one that, in my opinion, is probably maybe even more important, is the number of unfilled positions that we're seeing out there. And it's an issue in a lot of our manufacturing clients, but quite frankly, it's an issue in a lot of our other clients as well. But just the fact that there's a lot of companies out there that wish they could hire additional people, that are trying to hire additional people and have open positions. It's getting to the point where it is becoming a real issue for a lot of our clients. Just to give an example, I was out at a client, I think it was last week, and they have about 15 open positions that they would like to fill out on their manufacturing floor. And they're a fairly good sized manufacturer, but they're not extremely large. And so just to hear that and to hear the struggle that they're having to find those people is kind of concerning. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Abby. And so, with this limitation that it's really kind of turning into, is we're kind of pivoting and asking our clients too, like, how are you planning to grow as we move forward? And so in relation to this, what it really comes down to is, it's kind of working through these three questions here on the screen. And it's, how many open positions do you have currently, and how long have you been trying to fill them? And then the next question is as you project out 3 to 5 years and think about what your growth objectives are from a revenue standpoint, what that means from a production standpoint and an output standpoint, and then as far as your processes and everything, how many more positions would you have to fill over those 3 to 5 years in order to support those growth objectives? And then combining that with maybe positions that are currently open, is that really all that realistic to expect to go find that many people in a cost-effective manner? And so that's kind of the crux of where we're at, I think, what a lot of people are struggling with as they look forward and try to figure out how they're going to continue to grow and continue to become more efficient in their processes. And so lastly, at that point there, what do you do? And go ahead to the next slide, Abby. And really, from what we're seeing is it's really accelerating the automation that's coming into the manufacturing industry, even at a smaller scale manufacturers. So whereas maybe before, the words up on the screen, those concepts of robotics, Industry 4.0, RPA, 3D printing, all those kinds of things were maybe thought of as, multi-billion dollar global manufacturers, kind of reserved for those. We're seeing a lot of that coming down into smaller manufacturing companies. As technology improves and as technology becomes more cost effective, we're seeing some of that change and more adoption of automation in smaller manufacturing companies. And not only because it is more cost effective, but because it's almost turning into a necessity from that standpoint in order to support growth. And so, Abby, if you want to, yep, there you go. And so really what we're seeing here is, with a easier adoption of automation and some of this technology and lower cost effectiveness, that the cost benefit on some of this is really changing. The analysis is changing as, we look at higher labor costs and more cost effective application and implementation of some of this technology. It's changing that cost benefit analysis. And then to take it one step further is maybe it isn't even a cost benefit analysis anymore, and it's more of almost a necessity for growth, kind of as I've touched on before, in that it's almost, if you can't really expect to go find the individuals needed to support your processes, that it might be the only option left, and it's more of an opportunity cost type of thing, as opposed to the hard costs of, say, putting a certain robot or machine in, and what's the labor savings that's going to come from that. So if you want to go to the next slide, Abby. And so really, to try to tie this back to cybersecurity and CMMC, really what Ty and I want people to think about is as automation becomes more prevalent, and as we put more machines and more robots out on production floors, that means connectivity. And whether it's simply machines being connected to one another so they can talk and efficiently run processes, or if it means connectivity to the outside world, or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure Ty has much more technical terms that he can go over with you. Really just making sure we're aware of that now that everything's is connected, and what does that mean from a security standpoint if we introduce 2 or 3 new machines out on the shop floor that are very different from your classic computer in an office setting. From a security standpoint, are we taking the necessary steps to make sure those are secure? And so really that's kind of where we're going with this, and what we'd like people to start thinking about. And so before I kick it over to Ty to go over and really get into the nuts and bolts of CMMC, we do have a poll question that we wanted to put up, just to kind of get a sense for where kind of the level of familiarity there is with CMMC. So yeah, just curious to know whether or not you currently believe your organization is subjected to CMMC requirements. And Ty, you can chime in if you want, but I know from what I've seen and what I've heard, I feel like a lot of companies are in kind of the not sure section. So
right. Yeah, I think you're onto a great point there, Andrew. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of things that may not have been communicated very well as you were doing work for a particular client that might have been doing work for the government. But now all of that's coming to a head. So I'll be interested to see what our audience thinks around the CMMC journey. Obviously, they're in attendance, so they feel like this has some value for them. But you've touched on a lot of good things, right? Especially around security and Industry 4.0, and the shortage of people and moving to automation in order to help. So check that out.
Yep.
47% are unsure. Yeah.
So,
imagine that.
So that's not, yeah, I would say that's not ultra surprising from what we've seen. So so yeah, I'll let you take it away.
That's perfect. So the slide explains itself, right? If you're currently bidding and you're working with a larger contractor, or you're working directly with the government, you hold or you bid or you review federal contract information, you fall into scope of the cybersecurity maturity model certification that the Department of Defense has partnered with the CMMC accreditation board on. If you've ever logged in to the Procurement Integrity Enterprise Environment, or the PIEE, or SPURS, and forgive me for the typo in there, SPRS versus SPURS, like you would see on boots or whatever, but you are definitely in that scope. If any of your contractors or your clients have asked you to do a National Institute of Standards and Technology 800-171 self-assessment, you are in scope. But more importantly, I think, to go back to Andrew's point, we talked about people and we talked about automation, but we also talked, we might not have highlighted as much. There's some of you out there today that are in the manufacturing space, maybe not, maybe you're in R&D or in science, but you are looking to bridge that gap, right, and have another revenue stream. And so if you're planning to do any type of bidding with the government, particularly for the DoD or any of those projects, you need to take a look at being CMMC certified. Do you have a current or a future need to review federal contract information? All of those things have implications. And there's multiple levels to that CMMC, but more importantly, if we talk about why, the quick overview, why are we talking about CMMC? And Abby, you can go ahead and flip the slide for us there. Like it says, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification is a unified implementation for the defense industrial base. Our government has found that, nation states out there like China, Iraq, Iran, try to find out how we put together the equipment that our troops use, both in battle and in peacetime, and mimic those particular things. So what we're really talking about here is safeguarding controlled unclassified information. And what we also found in this space is that as the threat landscape rises, all of you have probably watched the news, so you've seen the stuff with the meat suppliers, obviously Colonial Pipeline. The threats are getting more real every single day. And while you may feel like you're a small fish, a small fish in a big pond, the reality is you are a key, an integral part of the information chain that runs up to the Department of Defense, or for that matter, even if you're not in the CMMC space yet, but you have partnerships with larger organizations, you are an integral part of that information system and communication chain, and so you are at risk. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit more about why CMMC and what the problem it solves. So this infographic here we put together as a team to really kind of demonstrate, and we're going to follow it clockwise. We're going to start at the, I guess you could call that the 7 o'clock space, right? Why the CMMC certification? It's based on NIST 800-171 and a couple other regulations out there, but a lot of times, significant vendor subjects or relationships can claim that they're doing what they are supposed to safeguard their infrastructure, and they're not. CMMC requires you to be able to document it. It depends on the maturity level for the documentation, but clearly you have to be in scope of safeguarding, whether it be contract information or be controlled unclassified information, which could even be technical diagrams and things like that. CMMC is a pass or fail type of certification. So unlike in the past for health organizations, when you go to your doctor's office, they might get a HIPAA risk assessment, and they might have some outstanding issues that they can work through, but still continue to see you as a patient. The Department of Defense wants it to be that if you cannot pass the controls that they've identified through CMMC, you cannot have access to contract information or controlled unclassified information. So literally you're losing a revenue stream if you do not safeguard that information, that data. CMMC is very much data focused, right? Whether it be in the technology or the way that the information travels around through your environment, from a welder to a CNNC station, or through programming, through automation, like Andrew was talking about, there needs to be controls, process and procedures and safeguards in place, and robust reporting in order to ensure that when you identify that there's a problem, you notify your upchain, your client, who you might be doing work for, or whether that be the prime vendor or the government immediately. And then the last, when you start looking at the 2 and 3, reducing your data, reducing how your network sees data, who can see the data, is really a critical part of the CMMC as well too. And it has a far-reaching effect on what maturity level you need to be at. And then the last thing there, when you get to the 4 or 5 o'clock, failure has direct impact on revenue, like I shared with you earlier. So it behooves you to have good controls around your information systems, your process, and your procedures internally. So the first thing we're going to talk about, go ahead, Abby, you're good, is we're going to talk about federal contract information. That federal contract information is information not intended for public release, that's provided by or generated for the government under a contract to develop or deliver a product. So you might be a couple levels removed from that particular information, but if you need it in order to be able to bid with your client, whether that be the prime or you're bidding directly with the government, you need to have controls in place to safeguard it. It is critical that that information does not get out because it speaks to the nature of what they want to have done. And more importantly, when you look at the CMMC model, in order to just be able to see that type of information, you need to be at a maturity level 1. And it focuses purely on safeguarding just that contract information, whether that be through your email systems, how you store it on your computers, or if you store it on a server, are you utilizing the correct cloud environment? So a lot of people would think, well, man, that could be pretty daunting, Ty, but the reality is as a rule, maturity level 1 certification to see contract information doesn't require you to have these really strong policies and procedures written out. A lot of it can be ad hoc. As you will learn as we talk about this some more, the majority of the folks in this manufacturing space or doing business with the government will really only need to be at a maturity level 1. Abby, go ahead and go to the next slide for us. The next thing I spoke to you guys about was controlled unclassified information. And so controlled unclassified information is unclassified information that's really tied or associated with a law or regulation, which we'll be talking about here shortly, or government-wide policy that identifies the needing of safeguarding. So it's pretty interesting. Our President Biden, sent out an executive order to the Department of Defense and to CISA and to the Department of Homeland Security around us improving our cybersecurity, importantly about creating this infrastructure that makes it even harder for folks to do that. So that's some of the orders that help control that. DOD and CUI replaces old language around CDI if you've already been in this space, or FOUO for information tagging and documenting. It's this particular information a lot of time is only intended for the authorized holder who's working on a particular project. The other thing may be is as an organization, you might be doing work for a client in this space that's the primary and you're the secondary and you're doing a small piece of the puzzle. If you create any type of technical drawings or anything like that that's specific to stuff that is not commercial off the shelf, I couldn't just go buy it at a Home Depot or a Lowe's, then you have got to put the correct markings on it, and you've got to have the correct information security systems and security plans in place in order to ensure you are protecting that information. Abby, let's go ahead and move to the next one. So people go, well, why CMMC accreditation board? Why are we having all this conversation? Well, the DoD is a client, as a customer, and they're a policy creation organization. They're not very good at oversight. It's not in their area of expertise. Before they would partner it off, or they allowed you to do a self-assessment, they realized in order to drive better information security and governance around those two forms of information that we've been talking about, FCI and CUI, that they needed an independent accreditation body that was authorized to not only certify an organization, but certify assessors or practitioners that help organizations in this space. Thanks, Abby. The next thing we really need to think about here is like understanding the path, right? So Andrew talked about needing people, talked about automation. We talked about, I wrote a couple notes here to myself, like maybe you're in an organization that's a hybrid of automation, so it's people and automation. Understanding the path. The path here is critical. And so what you need to do is, a lot of times folks may wait till the last minute to get to that particular point and trying to get certification. But if it is critical to your organization in order to be do business in this space, achieve your revenue objectives, you clearly have to start this journey sooner versus later. Abby, next slide. So the foundation of the CMMC is based on some regulations that already exist. That regulation framework consists of our Federal Acquisition Regulation 52.204-21. This has the 17 basic cyber safeguarding hygienes in place. To sum it up, you can't see a contract if you're not performing at this particular level. And in a particular case here, in the next coming years, you won't be able to look at or bid at all if you're not doing that. The next one that we want to think about in the foundation is a Defense Federal Acquisition Supplement. So this was put into play last year. It was discussed in September. It was put in play around additional cybersecurity hygiene controls for those that are doing business in the DoD space. And it really kind of hones in on making sure that you have good, robust incident response and reporting to not only your prime, but potentially even the DoD if you've suffered some sort of incident like the Colonial Pipeline or like JBS has. And then the foundation of CMMC is based on the NIST 800-171. So NIST 800-171, a lot of you, if you've already been in this space, know you had to do a self-assessment and submit it into that procurement pipeline that we talked about with SPURS. And you had to submit a score that said you were doing these controls or you weren't doing them. So there's 17 families of controls that are in play in the NIST that take you all the way up from maturity level 1 to maturity level 3. Maturity level 3 is the critical one that you need to be at in order to be able to have access to the CUI information. So, but what I would say to you is that you really need to make sure that you are, if you have technology and you're utilizing these things and you're doing your self-assessment, that you don't inaccurately report what you do or don't have in place, because it could have far-reaching impacts for you on your business objectives. So Abby, let's move to the timeline, because the timeline really talks about it. So 2020, all the way from 2017 and up until 2020, there was discussion about it, and then the full-on implementation began. So some of you may have been, who are in this line and have done business with like the Northrop Grummans, General Dynamics of the world, the Sikorskys, may have gotten letters from those contractors that do business with the Department of Defense, and you do business for them, that ask them to provide their self-assessment. And now the trickle-down effect, it's reaching down to you and they're expecting it. But remember, I was talking about the timeline and the far-reaching impacts. So this year alone, in 2021, they're expecting 1,500 organizations seeking certification, manufacturers, R&D, universities, whatever that may be, to achieve anywhere between maturity level 1 and maturity level 3. And if you look at that slide, you'll see that the heaviest part of it, like I shared with you, is at maturity level 1. 899 organizations will need to be there. 149 will need to achieve maturity level 2. For those of you, it's not the biggest part, but it speaks to you're improving your cyber hygiene if you're working towards maturity level 2. Doesn't necessarily give you access to CUI, but allows you to build in and cook in these behaviors to grow your organization to the maturity. This is really honed in on culture. So if you haven't had a regular cadence about talking about your IT or talking about information security, risk management in your monthly, quarterly, annual business discussions, this really kind of gives you the opportunity to ramp up and start building that into your culture and in your leadership and within your employees that are helping you to get there. By 2022, if you look at that, that is over 450% increase, right? 7,500 organizations need to be certified. So you say to me, well, Ty, how long is a certification good for? Well, once you've been assessed, your certification is good for 3 years. However, right, 2021, 2022, you won't see anybody having to do a recert until 2024. But it just gets increasingly bigger and bigger here. So, but when everything is said and done, 47,905 organizations seeking certification will need to be certified. And then there'll also be in 2025, the second wave of those folks that are looking to recertify. It behooves you to find a relationship and a partner with an organization that can help you get to that particular point. So, Abby, go ahead and we'll go to the next slide.
Hey, Ty.
Yeah.
You touched on it a little bit on culture, and I've heard you talk about this before. Maybe just give a little more color around. I've heard you say that it's not your typical regulation, and where it's more about the culture of cybersecurity. And I think you maybe even mentioned it goes beyond, data on computers and electronic means to, papers and binders or whatever you call it, moving through the shop floor. So maybe just touch on that a little bit.
No, that's great. Thanks for bringing that up, Andrew. So culture is everything in this. You've built your company to achieve particular goals. You feel like you're a manufacturer that is building this widget, right? You're not an IT company, but IT is an integral part of it. But more importantly, for culture, just because you might write some policies, you might write some procedures, if I, as a certified assessor or a registered practitioner, come in and I can't observe those behaviors in your team, then that is a fail, right? Just because you have the policy, you have to be able to walk your talk, a little John Wayne in there, right? And so when you put these things in place, Andrew is one of our green belts on the team as well too, like a Six Sigma and stuff like that. It is about breeding in these process and procedures that there's steps, and that if I look at your booklet, if I grab, like I have my little notebooklet here, and I look at your booklet and it says, A, you're supposed to log in, or you're supposed to use your proximity card to access the building, but you're not supposed to allow anybody to piggyback off of that. And I come and I stand outside the building when you come in, and I watch Andrew use his proximity card and then wave 3 of his friends on in that they don't have to proximity in. That is a fail for physical security, right? Culturally, each and every individual needs to do that exact same step. No matter how mundane it might feel or boring, it is part of safeguarding the infrastructure. Around the paper traveler, right? You're talking to a information security guy, and a lot of times all we focus on is the technology, the computer, the server, the email. But we realize in a lot of these environments, paper, folders, pencils, notebooks still have value. And so they follow the product, they follow the job around. Do you have steps in place that if it does have controlled unclassified information on it, you have a cover sheet on it that identifies it as such? That at the end of the day, if you're not a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, at the end of your second shift, does that information get secured somewhere where an individual can't just walk in to a workstation and grab it, right? So do your people follow that particular process? At the end of the day, does the shop super gather up all the information, or does the particular work bay that's doing the work take that information and place it into a locked facility, right? All of those things are important. Another cultural thing would be on a manufacturing facility that has CUI, do you have a guest login process? Do they sign into a book? Do they have a lanyard that they wear? All of those things are culture, right? Sometimes it comes from the bottom up, from the people who are doing work every day, and sometimes it comes from the top down, but it's always married in the middle with making sure that your people are driving what the objectives are for your organization every single day. And so safeguarding has to be an additional part of that. You're not just welding, you're not just sewing, you're not just stamping. You are much more to the Department of Defense and to this country's infrastructure. And we realize that every day, while it may seem mundane, you have to continue to do the same process over and over again.
Yeah. No,
does that help?
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's a great point about perhaps paper and notebooks still having value. I think sometimes we forget about that in this day and age, and just the prevalence of technology and electronic data and everything like that. So I think that's a great point, especially thinking through it as stuff moves through a shop floor. So.
Correct. And then how long do you keep it for? Do you shred it? Do people just ball it up and throw it in a trash bin? All of those things have to be thought about. Those are cultural thoughts, right? Are we helping our folks get the knowledge? Do they have the will to do it, the heart, right? And the other parts of it, do we have the skill for the folks that are working on the computers or in the welding or stamping bays to know what they're supposed to do? Awareness is a us thing, not just an event that happens once a year or twice a year. It's a living, breathing thing in an organization that drives its success, which leads right into, Andrew, with the maturity levels here, which is around, maturity level 1, like I shared with you, is basic hygiene. It is demonstrating that you have some IT security stuff in place, you have some physical security, you utilize, while it may not be totally structured out, you have a culture and you have an information security system that is very focused on safeguarding contract information. And it's the basic level of cyber hygiene. The next step, which is an intermediate step, is maturity level 2. It adds on an additional 55 practices to demonstrate that you are working towards having good cyber hygiene for what you need for CUI. CUI has 130 practices. And so in those 130 practices, you also have to have process and procedures. I mean, you're talking almost 1,000 things that you have to be able to demonstrate for an assessor for you to pass a maturity level 3 certification. The nice thing here is, for most organizations that are on this webinar with us today, you're only going to need to be somewhere between maturity level 1 and maturity level 3. It does have a cost involved with it, and I'm not going to dive too deep in that today. The Department of Defense created some costing calculations. Andrew's our expert there on costing as well too. So if you have questions about that, we can help you in those particular regards. But there's a cost to get to maturity for the preparation and for the certification, whether you do it internally or you hire someone to help you. And then, maturity level 4 and maturity level 5, based off of the graph I shared with you guys previously, only 1/10 of a percent of folks are going to need to be there. So that's a pretty small space, right? That's probably your Northrop Grummans, that's probably your Sikorskys, General Dynamics. Those folks are going to need to be there. It progressively speaks to your cybersecurity, but more importantly, it speaks to your infrastructure, and it speaks to a budgeting and cost. Information security, IT is a critical part of their business. They probably have well-structured teams, unlike folks that might have to be at maturity level 1 through 3 that are smaller businesses. And somebody on the team who also is a welder might have a bend towards technology, and so they help set up the computers as well too. It changes, the dynamic is a little bit different. So Abby, go ahead and pivot over to the next slide for us.
Hey Ty, but before we move on, if you want to go back, Abby, can you give an example? You talk about the different practices and how there's 17 in maturity level 1 versus maybe 130 in maturity level 3. Can you just give 1 or 2 examples of what one of those practices would be? Maybe a typical basic maturity level 1, and then something that would be more specific to maturity level 3, and then maybe maturity level 5. Like, what's something specific that would reference?
Yeah, so that's really good. So if we talk about the control families, one good one would be around access control. Access control not only for the building, for who comes in, but also access control for the computer systems. So as a user, if I'm on the engineering team, do I have access to, if I don't need to have access to contract information and CAD, do I still have access, or do you have a structure around what applications that person's able to use? Do you have any type of media protection in place? Are you safeguarding the paper traveler, like I said, with securing it that might move around from station to station? Are you putting media, or when I say media, I'm talking about data on a USB jump drive, USB drive? Do you store that somewhere safely afterwards? System communication protections, right, around email. Do you utilize any type of multi-factor authentication as well too? Do you transmit classified information in the open, or do you send a secure link? Those would all be things around maturity level 1. Maturity level 3, has all 17 domains. And so now you got to pivot and you got to focus on all cylinders here. I mean, you've got to have things in place around, have you had a security assessment in the last 12 months? Do you do any type of situational awareness training? If Andrew and I show up at your shop, even though you're a client of Rea, or that you were expecting us, can we just walk in the back and start walking around without any employee saying, which is the culture piece I was talking about, any employee saying to us, hey, who are you here with? And if I'm not with somebody, taking me to the shop super or walking me up to the front so I get registered, right? The other thing would be around audit and accountability, which accounting folks love to hear. Audit and accountability. Are you auditing your technology, right? Do you know what software is on every workstation? Is the work package appropriate, right? Do you know who has access rights, right? Have you run an awareness training program? Do you train annually or quarterly? Every quarter for us here at Rea, we get some form of situational awareness training around ransomware or around other threats that might, about phishing emails, so that we stay cognizant of these things. Do you have a recovery plan in place? And I'll probably stop there, right? Because I could just go through the litany list here. When the stuff hits the fan, like what's going on with JBS, do you have a way for you to be able to restore? Are you doing backups? Are you testing those backups? Do you have an incident response plan? Those are all parts that speak to a more mature cybersecurity or information security program and speak to good cyber hygiene. That was a great question, Andrew.
Good. No, I think that's helpful to know what some of those specific activities or practices are. So
yeah, and that was a high level, right? So I hit those things at a high level for us. But when you get down into the nuts and bolts, you really have to speak to who does what, how they do it, when they do it, and then there has to be some evidence that it's actually being done.
Yep.
All right, so the proposed solution for organizations seeking certification, you need to do your self-assessment, right? And that self-assessment is available online, or a lot of times your client that you're working for, whether that be the DoD directly or that be another prime vendor, will provide that to you, and then you have to upload that information. You also have to look at scoping your system boundaries and then request a maturity level that you want to seek. So if you think that you're only going to be maturity level 3 or maturity level 1, and you only need to look at federal contract information, you could probably do some of that in-house, or you could partner with a registered provider organization that has registered practitioners that can help you prepare for the assessment. But once you've done all that preparation, you need to reach out to the CMMC accreditation board to request your certification and get assigned an assessor. So Abby, if we go ahead and pivot to that next one, that'll probably help us. That process, like I said, is a self-assessment, conduct an internal self-assessment, or you hire an RPO or C3PAO, certified third-party assessor organization to help you conduct a gap analysis. And then if anything where you're not performing correctly on any of those steps, whether it be maturity level 1 to maturity level 3 or 5 for that matter, you have a plan of action milestones of when you're going to fix it and when it's going to be implemented. So let's say after 30 days, you fixed it, right? And now you request your assessment. If an assessor were to come out and look at you, 30 days isn't enough time to build a culture. We always like to say in the business world, 30 days you build a habit, right? But culture really looks like something after about 90 days. So you can't just pencil whip it in, and because you've been doing it 30 days now say you're good to go. You have a habit, but you don't have a culture. After you've put your plan of action milestones in place and you've kind of checked them off, you've built your process, you've built your information security plan, you've done things around access control or asset management, you now are ready to go out and hire a certified third-party assessor to help you with your assessment, right? And so that's where you reach out to the CMMC AB, and they will, or you reach out to an assessor organization and you hire them to do that. Here's where it gets sticky, right? And where the rubber hits the road. Each one of the practices that I talked about earlier on slides for the 130 that are in place for the maturity level 3, you have to be able to satisfy with at least 2 forms of objective evidence that you are doing that particular process. That might come from interviews. That might be evidence reviewed that's preferred, like a demonstration. It might be where the certified third party is testing, right? And so then the findings from that are labeled as pass, which it addresses the cybersecurity maturity model practice certification, or fail, it does not. I guess if I were to go back to the original part here on step 1 with hire an RPO or hire a certified third-party assessor, is these folks are like having a personal trainer. Some of you may train on your own because you have some experience from your days in youth of high school or college from lifting weights and getting ready. But if you were going to try to specialize in something like the shot put or throw the discus and you've never done it before, you'd get a coach. And that coach would teach you not only the strength portion of it, but the speed and the agility, the technique to get you prepared and ready to be successful as a discus thrower or as a shot put thrower. If you are not doing those things up front and you don't think that you have the skill set or the skills in house to do it, it could be detrimental to get to that particular point where you're requesting assessment from a certified third-party assessor and you fail. You're out of that money, right? Now you have 7 days where you could go out and you could potentially, if you felt that it was unjust, and challenge it, but you have to do that request within 7 days of failure. And then what will happen is the accreditation body will have one of their assessors come out and review it. If they come out and review it again and they identify that, yes, the assessor was correct, you weren't prepared, you will have to go back to the drawing board with your plan of action milestones, right? And do like Andrew and one of my coworkers here on the cyber team, Sean Richardson, likes to do, and go to the whiteboard and draw it all out again and say, hey, how do we fix this? Where do we stumble? How do we patch this back up? So I would just say to you that take the time to prepare now. Look at resources that you have out there. The manufacturing extension program has some good resources out there to help you. If you're already in the space, right? It's already been discussed with a couple folks, like, is there some way to be granted money to get prepared for it? So if you're brand new to the space, there's a ton of money out there to help you beyond the other maturity levels to get where you need to be between maturity level 1 and maturity level 3. If you're already in the space, you won't necessarily get any reimbursement or grant money to help you for things that you've already told the Department of Defense and the prime contractor, depending on what that relationship is that you have, because you've already told them that you're doing these particular controls. So they're not going to reimburse you for stuff that you're already doing. But the thing that I really want everybody to understand is that CMMC levels the playing field. Everybody has to do it if they want to be in this particular space. And the Department of Defense has said that it's an allowable cost to pass along in the contracting. So that's something that you really need to be aware of as well, too. But I would just say, I hope as you go through this particular journey, if you have questions, you reach out to OSU or to whoever your MEP or magnet program is, and utilize them as a resource. If you have relationships with security providers that have some experience in this space, you partner with them as well too. And then if you don't, I'm not trying to use this as a sales pitch, but Andrew and I love to help manufacturers and businesses out to succeed, to be around the next 3, 5, 10 years. You've got us here as well as a resource that we can help answer questions for you. That's really all I've got. I guess I would say, are there any questions out there for us from our guests in the webinar that might want to ask something a little bit more detailed?
Ty, I don't see any coming through right now. The one other question I would have is, I think you touched on it briefly on the trickle-down effect coming through the primes down into various levels of subs. Can you just touch on that a little bit more, what you mean by that and what you've seen in that as far as that goes, and how that has been impacting some smaller manufacturers that you've talked to?
Yeah, so I can't say names because of client privilege and confidentiality, but there's been several folks that we've spoke with as a firm that have lost out on business. One in particular, pretty significant, almost a $500,000 in revenue was lost because one of their clients, who was a prime, sent down a self-assessment form that they needed to load into the SPURS, the supplier risk assessment portal, and they didn't do it. And they received that email from that client back in November. So now you fast forward to March when they reach out to us, they've lost a $500,000 in revenue, and now they're trying to do the self-assessment and get that information in so that they can start bidding on contracts again. So that trickle-down effect is the primes, or for that matter, the DoD is telling you that if you have a relationship with us, we need you to start taking your cybersecurity seriously, and we need to know that you're doing it. And so it's not a pencil whipping exercise. It's very dangerous if you're unclear about what a particular practice is meaning in the NIST 800-171 around those 17 control domains. And so when you don't know, by all means, you should take a partner. And if you don't have a valued IT partner, there should be some folks out there, because they're costly mistakes. One, either by your own omission to do it, or two, by saying that you're doing something and then you're not. So, those things are things that are foreseeable, and the reason why we wanted to reach out with the Ohio State University MEPS and kind of do the seminar is, don't get yourself caught in that trick bag, right? And if you're looking to generate a new revenue stream, which we've had some clients do as well too, start preparing your infrastructure for it. A lot of times you can't just go out and buy off the shelf from Walmart or Best Buy technology that gives you the best business, in-class business solution for what you're trying to do. When you think about what Andrew shared around investing money in automation and infrastructure there, that's pretty costly if you don't put the right technology around it to safeguard it from those that would want to commit harm, not only to the United States of America, but to your business. And so, you really have to think about the impact that your relationship has with the folks that you do business with, or that are asking you to do things for them. Does that help, Andrew?
Yep. No, that's perfect. So there was one question that came in. Where do we find the self-assessment that we need to turn in? Is this located through a website, or yeah, what do we do from that standpoint?
Yeah, it is on a website. The Office of the Undersecretary of Defense has a website that you can download that from, and even has a guidebook if you're going to try to do it internally around the different steps to hit maturity level 1 to maturity level 3. So I will make sure if that person provides their email address, we'll make sure that we get that website over to you for the undersecretary so that you can find that form. More importantly, if you're doing business with someone that is doing business with the Department of Defense and you're doing a small piece of the puzzle, they should have shared it with you as well too already.
Okay, sounds good. I think that's it for the questions. I have one more myself, and that's, almost 50% of the folks in the poll said they're not sure if they're going to be subject to it. So what's the one or two things, just take 30 seconds here. What's the one or two things that anybody in that situation can do to try to find out if they're going to be subject to it, and if this is something they need to address?
So I think we hit on a couple things there, Andrew. If you're looking at getting into doing business with the Department of Defense, you're subject to it. And it may not be on a particular contract this year, but you should begin the heavy lifting now. If you're already in the space and you're doing business with folks, that vendor should be sharing in the documents with you if it's controlled unclassified information. If you're unsure, I would challenge you to ask the client that you're doing business for, is this tied to a government contract? They have to tell you, they have to be transparent with that. If it is, then you need to make, and you know that, and you're making something that is custom for them, not something that you've already made that could be used between Rea, between another organization. Like I said, like you could buy from a Home Depot or a Lowe's. Then you need to have the controls in place to safeguard that technical data under controlled unclassified information or federal contract information. So I think those are the two major questions you need to ask. And so my dad used to drive me nuts with this phrase when I was a teenager. He used to say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. And I used to want to strangle him every time he'd say that to me. But, it was a good life lesson, because ignorance of whether you need to have a CMMC certification or be demonstrating these controls is no excuse. And so if you are dealing with that information and they find out, even though that person you were making it for didn't share that information for you, you still have a responsibility and to ask, and then to safeguard it just as if you were the first person to know about it.
Okay, gotcha. No, I think that's good. So I don't think there's any other questions that have come in. So I think that's all we had. Amani, I'm not sure if you have something for a wrap up.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for today's webinar on Deep Impact, Are You on a Collision Course with CMMC? We hope that the team was able to provide you with some valuable insight in regards to best practices and potential solutions. If you sign off today and realize that you have additional questions, you're always welcome to reach out to any of the presenters directly. And thank you guys. We hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone.